Chapter 4 Part 5. The air in the Persephone's cramped cabin vibrated with the low thrum of diesel engines and high-stakes tension. Angela laid out her plan, the words feeling both audacious and insane as she spoke them. Russo, Megan, Mrs. Henderson, and Old Man Peters listened, their faces etched with skepticism that slowly hardened into grim resolve. Eleanor's fortress, Angela began, tracing a rough map of the cliffside estate Russo had sketched on a grease-stained chart. It's her control center. Impenetrable, they say. But it's also her prison. Perpetual light. Sterile air. No natural cycles. She tapped Robert's notebook. Subject Zero needs the rhythm of day and night, the bleed of the stone's minerals, to produce its toxin and the catalyst for the cure. Locked in that glass cage, under constant artificial light, it's dormant. Powerless. Benign. If she even has it, Russo rumbled, his gaze flicking to Anthony's restless form. The sedative was wearing off. Low moans escaped him, his bandaged arm twitching as if swatting invisible flies. She has it, Angela stated, certainty cold in her gut. Robert gave her samples early on before he knew. Ben might have found evidence. It's the root of her power, the source of the poison she weaponized. She'd keep it close. A trophy. A tool. She looked at Anthony, his face contorted in silent terror. And I think it's why he's like this. The static. It's not just the fever or the toxin exposure. It's a connection. Eleanor's using it, feeding his fear, tethering him to her. Megan's eyes widened. Like a psychic leash? Something like that, Angela nodded. Destroy Subject Zero at its source, inside her sterile heart, and we break the root of the toxin. We sever that tether. Maybe it stops the static. And if it doesn't? Mrs. Henderson asked quietly, her gaze compassionate but unwavering. If it just makes her furious? Then we still destroy the source, Angela said, her voice firm. We take away her ability to ever create more Vitalix, more dose zero, more poison. We rot the root of her empire. She held up the vial containing the last half dose of the glowing blue catalyst. This is the bait. Or the lifeline. We'll know when we get there. The plan coalesced with brutal efficiency, forged in the shared defiance of Harbor's End. The diversion, Harbor's End would stage a massive, noisy protest at the Moretti Foundation's downtown Port Townsend offices. Mrs. Henderson, Old Man Peters, and dozens of others would demand answers about Vitalix, the clinic closure, and the frozen funds. They'd be loud, disruptive, and crucially, visible, drawing Eleanor's security and media attention downtown. The infiltration, Russo would navigate the salty dog, less recognizable than the Persephone, to a secluded cove below the cliffside bluffs, hidden from the main estate. Angela and Megan would scale the cliffs using a path Russo knew from his youth, a treacherous fisherman's route. The tech, Megan, armed with Anthony's laptop and Magpie's dark web tools accessed via satellite link, would hack the estate's perimeter security, not to disable it entirely, too obvious, but to create a narrow, timed blind spot in the camera feeds and motion sensors near a service entrance Robert had once shown Russo. The static guide, Anthony, still trapped in the static, would be monitored via a makeshift biosensor rig Megan cobbled together from Doc Evans' supplies. Heart rate, EEG leads reading brainwave chaos. Angela believed his terror would spike as they neared Subject Zero, acting as a horrifying homing beacon. The confrontation, find Subject Zero. Expose it to the perpetual artificial light of Eleanor's prison, confirming its dormancy, then destroy it utterly. Use the last dose zero catalyst only as a last resort for Anthony, or as a devastating distraction against Eleanor. Russo looked at Angela, his gaze assessing. You realize she's expecting this? That cutter wasn't her only move. The glass house will be a trap. I know, Angela said, meeting his eyes. But it's the only way to cut the root. And Anthony. She looked at him, shuddering as another wave of invisible terror gripped him. He's running out of time. The pre-dawn hours were a study in controlled chaos. Harbor's End mobilized with fierce, quiet efficiency. Boats dispersed, heading back to port to gather people. Russo steered the salty dog south, hugging the coast, navigating by instinct and shielded running lights. Below deck, Megan worked furiously on the laptop, her face illuminated by the screen's glow, lines of code scrolling rapidly. "Got the schematics," she whispered. Magpie dug deep. "Estate security is insane. Military grade. But Robert's service tunnel. It's still on the blueprints. Decommissioned, but the physical access point." She highlighted a spot on a digital map. "Near the West Garden cliff edge. Sensors there are on a separate, older grid. I can loop the feed for 90 seconds. Tops. After that, all hell breaks loose." 90 seconds, Angela repeated, strapping on a small backpack containing the dose 0 vial, the syringe, water, and basic tools. "Get us in, Meg." Anthony lay on a pad on the deck, Megan's biosensors taped to his chest and temples. His eyes were open, unseeing, fixed on the mist-shrouded cliffs growing larger in the gray light. His heart rate monitor beeped erratically, spiking with each internal surge of terror. The EEG readout was a frantic scribble of chaotic brainwaves. "Statics high, but stable," Megan reported, her voice tight. "Any spike when we get close." "We'll know," Angela said, checking her climbing harness. Russo cut the engines, letting the salty dog drift silently into the shadow of towering sea cliffs. The ascent was brutal. Wet, slippery rock, treacherous handholds. Angela led, Megan following, Anthony secured between them on a short safety line, guided more than climbing, his movements clumsy, driven by instinct and Angela's tugs. Russo stayed with the boat, a grim sentinel with a powerful rifle, watching the cliffs above. They reached the top, flattening themselves in dripping salal bushes. The Moretti estate sprawled before them, manicured lawns, stark modernist sculptures, and the massive glass cube of the main house, glowing with cold, internal light like a landed alien craft. No natural sunrise touched it. Service tunnel access there. Megan pointed to a nearly invisible metal hatch set flush into the cliff edge, overgrown with ornamental grass. "Cameras sweeping Sector 7 now." She typed frantically. "Looping. Go. Go. Go." Angela wrenched the heavy hatch open. Dank, stale air wafted out. A steep metal ladder descended into darkness. They bundled Anthony down first, Angela and Megan following. Megan pulled the hatch shut just as the camera sweep passed overhead. The tunnel was narrow, concrete, smelling of damp earth and disuse. Angela flicked on a penlight. Anthony immediately whimpered, shrinking back. The roots, they're moving, scratching the walls. His heart rate monitor spiked violently. The EEG flatlined into frantic peaks. Angela shone the light ahead. Nothing but empty tunnel. But Anthony was reacting to something unseen. "It's him," Megan breathed, staring at the bio readings. "He's sensing it. The static, it's pulling him." "Which way?" Angela asked Anthony softly, taking his good hand. "Anthony, where does it hurt? Where's the buzzing loudest?" Anthony's dilated eyes stared down the dark tunnel, filled with primal dread. He pointed a trembling finger straight ahead. "Down," he rasped. "Cold light." Mother's voice in the roots. They moved, guided by Anthony's terror. The tunnel ended at a heavy, rusted steel door. Megan examined the electronic keypad. Ancient, simpler than the main systems. Pre-Eleanor. Robert's code. She tried the date Ben showed her the starfish. 0612. A green light flickered. The door hissed open. They stepped into a cavernous, climate-controlled space that stole Angela's breath. Not a basement. A laboratory. Sleek, modern, humming with hidden machinery, utterly at odds with the decaying tunnel. It was a sterile, brightly lit extension of the glass house above. Rows of illuminated growth chambers lined the walls, containing genetically modified plants, hydroponic systems, but none matched Robert's description of Subject Zero. Anthony cried out, collapsing to his knees, clawing at his temples. Too loud. The screaming. It's in the light. His biosensors screamed warnings, heart rate skyrocketing, brainwaves chaotic. Angela's gaze swept the lab. Then she saw it. At the far end, on a raised, central dais bathed in the brightest, coldest LED light, stood a single, sealed containment unit. Inside, suspended in a nutrient-rich gel, was a plant unlike any other. A twisted, thorned vine, its base thick and gnarled like ancient driftwood, its leaves a deep, unhealthy purple, veined with iridescent blue that pulsed faintly, weakly, under the relentless artificial sun. Subject 0, archive specimen. Do not terminate light cycle, read the label. Eleanor hadn't just kept it, she'd put it on display. A monument to her control, rendered utterly harmless in its sterile, sunless prison. Root rot, Angela whispered, stepping towards the dais. A smooth, chilling voice echoed through the lab's hidden speakers. Root preservation, Miss Mitchell. Though I appreciate the sentiment. Lights blazed brighter. Panels slid open on the far wall. Eleanor Moretti stood there, flanked by 4 black-clad gardeners, weapons trained. She wore an immaculate ivory pantsuit, her expression one of icy amusement. Her gaze swept over Angela, Megan, then settled on Anthony, writhing on the floor, consumed by the static her proximity seemed to amplify. Anthony, darling, Eleanor sighed, her voice dripping with false pity. Look at you, dragged through the mud by these harbor's end strays. Lost in the noise. She took a step closer, her eyes locking onto Angela. You found my little museum piece. Impressive. Robert's sentimentality had its uses, preserving this curiosity. Harmless here, of course. Just like the toxin's potential is harmless under control. She gestured towards Anthony. His mind, however, less controlled. The connection is quite fascinating, isn't it? The dormant source, the amplified suffering in the receptive host. A living gauge of my displeasure. Angela stood her ground, her hand closing around the dose 0 vial in her pocket. You're poisoning your own son. Correcting him, Eleanor stated coldly. His weakness needed to be purged. His defiance punished. The static is a remarkably efficient teacher. She nodded to her gardeners. Take the boy, secure him, and retrieve my property from Miss Mitchell. Her gaze sharpened, predatory. The vial and the notebook. Now. The gardeners advanced. Megan stepped in front of Anthony, fists clenched, useless. Angela didn't move. She looked at Subject 0, bathed in its impotent artificial light. Then she looked at Anthony, lost in a hell of his mother's making. Robert's paradox echoed. The toxin's cure is its catalyst. Eleanor had turned Subject 0 into a powerless trophy. But the catalyst, the dose 0 derived from it, that still held power. Especially here, at the source. Angela pulled the vial from her pocket. The iridescent blue glow pulsed in the sterile light. Eleanor's eyes fixed on it with avaricious intensity. You want it? Angela asked, her voice surprisingly calm. You want the catalyst? The key to controlling the static? To weaponizing minds. She held it up. Then catch it. Before anyone could react, Angela turned and hurled the vial not at Eleanor, but with all her strength towards the sealed containment unit holding Subject 0. The vial shattered against the thick, transparent polymer wall. The glowing blue liquid splattered across the surface, seeping into microscopic seams around the seal, dripping onto the base of the unit. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Eleanor smirked. Sentimental dramatics, Miss MIT. Then Subject 0 moved. The thick, gnarled vine shuddered violently. The faint blue pulsing in its veins flared into an incandescent, hungry white light. The leaves stiffened, then began to unfurl with terrifying speed, lashing against the inside of its container. Thorns scraped the polymer like fingernails on glass. The nutrient gel began to bubble and churn, turning a sickly, luminescent green. No! Eleanor shrieked, her composure shattering. The light. It's dormant. It can't. But the dose 0 catalyst wasn't light. It was the concentrated essence of the bleeding stone's power, the inverted poison. Splashed onto its dormant source, inside the sterile prison. It was an awakening. A resurrection. The containment unit groaned. Hairline cracks spiderwebbed across the polymer, where the catalyst had struck. A high-pitched whine built in the air. Anthony screamed. Not a scream of terror this time, but a raw, agonized sound that seemed to tear from his very soul. He arched off the floor, his eyes flying open, clear and filled with horrifying realization. He wasn't seeing static. He was seeing connection. Mother! Stop it! It's alive! It hungers! The gardeners hesitated, staring in shock at the thrashing plant, the cracking container. Angela grabbed Megan's arm, pulling her back towards the tunnel door. Run! The containment unit exploded. Not with fire, but with a blinding, silent pulse of pure white light and a shockwave of force that threw Angela, Megan, and the gardeners off their feet. Shards of polymer flew like shrapnel. Subject Zero, freed and terrifyingly activated by its own concentrated essence, lashed out. Its thorned vines, now glowing with furious white energy, whipped through the air, striking equipment, sending showers of sparks cascading. One vine slammed into a bank of servers, erupting in flames. Another coiled around the leg of a stunned gardener, thorns sinking deep. He screamed, a sound abruptly cut off as he was yanked off his feet. Chaos erupted. Fire spread rapidly across spilled chemicals and shattered electronics. Alarms blared, deafening. Smoke filled the sterile lab. Eleanor stood amidst the chaos, her ivory suit smudged, her perfect hair askew, staring in abject horror at the monstrous, glowing plant thrashing in the center of her destroyed sanctum. Her monument to control had become a raging, untamed horror, birthed from the catalyst she coveted. Angela hauled Megan up. They stumbled towards the tunnel door, dragging a dazed but conscious Anthony, his eyes wide with the fading echo of the blast and the terrifying clarity of what he'd felt. He looked back once, not at the monstrous plant, but at his mother, frozen amidst the destruction she'd cultivated. Root met catalyst. Sterility met the wild essence of the bleeding stone. And deep within the glass heart of Eleanor Moretti's empire, Subject Zero roared back to life, unleashed and utterly, destructively beyond her control. The rot wasn't just at the root anymore, it was consuming the entire tree.